The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Kate slowly folded the last of her personal belongings into a simple wooden box. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up a photograph of her and William from their early days together, when they were just university students with dreams bigger than the world around them. The image captured a moment of pure joy, William's arm wrapped around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something now forgotten to time. Kate had always known this day would come, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of it pressing down on her chest like a stone. The doctors had been gentle but clear in their delivery 3 months ago. The rare condition that had been quietly stealing her strength for years had finally reached its final stage. There would be no more treatments, no more hope for recovery, only the precious time that remained. She placed the photograph carefully on top of the other memories in the box and closed the lid. The sound echoed in the quiet room where she had spent so many peaceful mornings reading letters from children around the world, planning charity events, and simply being herself away from the cameras and crowds. This room had been her sanctuary, and now she was saying goodbye to it forever. William appeared in the doorway, his usually perfect composure cracked just enough for Kate to see the pain he was trying so hard to hide. He had aged years in the past few months, the weight of watching the love of his life slowly slip away etched into every line of his face. Yet he still managed to smile for her, the same gentle smile that had captured her heart all those years ago at St. Andrews University. "The car is ready whenever you are," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. They both knew where they were going, to the small cottage in the countryside where Kate wanted to spend her final weeks, away from the palace protocol and royal duties, in a place where they could simply be William and Kate, not the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Kate nodded and stood slowly, accepting William's outstretched hand. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and familiar, a gesture they had shared thousands of times but which now felt precious beyond measure. They walked together through the palace corridors one last time, past the portraits of royal ancestors and the rooms where they had hosted state dinners and celebrated birthdays with their children. The staff they passed in the hallways looked away respectfully, but Kate could see the tears in their eyes. These people had become like family to her over the years, and she knew how much her departure was affecting everyone in the palace. She stopped to speak quietly with Mrs. Henderson, the elderly housekeeper, who had been with the royal family for over 30 years, taking her hands and thanking her for all the kindness she had shown. As they reached the main entrance, Kate paused and looked back one more time at the grand staircase, the crystal chandelier, and the oil paintings that had become such familiar parts of her daily life. She was saying goodbye not just to a building, but to an entire chapter of her existence that had been filled with both incredible privilege and tremendous responsibility. William squeezed her hand gently, understanding without words that she needed this moment to process the magnitude of what they were leaving behind. He had been her constant companion through every step of this journey, from the early days when she was learning to navigate royal protocol to now, when every day together was a gift they both treasured. The black car waited in the courtyard, its engine running quietly. Kate's personal secretary had already loaded her few remaining possessions into the trunk. She had chosen to take very little with her, wanting only the most meaningful items for her final journey. The crown jewels, the formal gowns, the ceremonial duties would all remain here, part of a life that no longer belonged to her. As they walked toward the car, Kate felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. Despite everything, she felt grateful for the years they had shared, for the love they had built together, and for the legacy of kindness and service she hoped to leave behind. The morning sun warmed her face, and for a moment, she could almost forget about the sadness of goodbye and simply appreciate the beauty of being alive in this moment, with this man in this place that had given her so much joy. The drive to the countryside cottage took them through villages where Kate had opened schools, visited hospitals, and met countless families during her years of royal service. William drove slowly, both of them wanting to savor these familiar sights one last time. The trees were beginning to show their autumn colors, painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. Kate pressed her hand against the car window as they passed the children's hospital where she had volunteered every month for the past 5 years. She could almost see the faces of the young patients who had drawn her pictures and written her letters, telling her she was their princess. Those relationships had meant more to her than any formal title or royal ceremony. The work she had done there, simply sitting beside sick children and reading them stories, had filled her heart in ways that state banquets and ceremonial duties never could. "Do you remember the little boy with the red hair?" she asked William, her voice soft with memory. "Tommy. He always asked me to bring you next time because he wanted to know if princes really had swords." William smiled despite his sadness, remembering how Kate had convinced him to visit the ward in full ceremonial uniform just to make one 7-year-old's day magical. "He wrote to us last month," William replied gently. "He's in remission now, starting school in September." Kate's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy mixed with sorrow. Knowing that Tommy would have a chance at a full life while her own was ending brought her both comfort and heartbreak. They continued driving through the rolling hills and past the small villages where people had lined the streets to wave at them during official visits. Kate had always insisted on stopping to meet as many people as possible during these trips, much to the frustration of security teams who preferred quick, controlled encounters. She had shaken hands with farmers, hugged elderly ladies, and listened to the concerns of young mothers, treating each person as if they were the most important individual in the world. The cottage came into view as they crested a small hill, nestled between ancient oak trees and surrounded by gardens that were still blooming despite the approaching winter. This place had been their secret retreat for years, where they came when the pressures of royal life became too overwhelming. Here, William could chop firewood and Kate could tend to her roses without photographers hiding in the bushes or reporters asking questions about their private moments. Mrs. Davies, the cottage caretaker, was waiting on the front step with a warm smile and tears in her eyes. She had known Kate and William since they were newlyweds, had seen them grow into their roles as parents and public figures, and had always provided a haven where they could simply be themselves. Kate had called her the week before to explain the situation, and the older woman had immediately begun preparing the cottage with all of Kate's favorite things. As they stepped out of the car, the silence of the countryside enveloped them. No traffic noise, no crowds, no ceremonial duties waiting to be fulfilled. Just the sound of wind through the trees and birds singing in the garden. Kate breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the clean country air that smelled of wood smoke and autumn leaves. William carried her small suitcase to the front door while Kate walked slowly through the garden, touching the flowers she had planted during happier visits. The roses were still blooming, their petals soft and fragrant, and she picked one to carry inside. Mrs. Davies had prepared tea and fresh scones, filling the cottage with the comforting smells of home. Inside, everything was exactly as Kate remembered, but somehow more precious now. The comfortable chairs by the fireplace where they had spent countless evenings reading together. The kitchen table where they had shared quiet breakfasts away from palace formality. The bedroom window that looked out over the meadow where deer came to graze in the early morning light. Kate settled into her favorite chair and accepted a cup of tea from Mrs. Davies, who fussed over her like a beloved grandmother. William sat beside her, closer than palace protocol would ever have allowed, and they simply enjoyed the peace of being together in this place that held so many happy memories. "I'm glad we came here," Kate said quietly, watching the late afternoon sunlight stream through the windows. "This feels right." William reached for her hand, grateful that she had chosen this peaceful place for her final chapter, rather than the formal grandeur of the palace. Here they could focus on love instead of duty, on each other instead of the world that was watching and waiting for news they weren't ready to share. The first weeks at the cottage passed like pages from a beautiful, bittersweet story. Kate and William created new routines that had nothing to do with royal schedules or public appearances. They woke each morning to watch the sunrise through their bedroom window, sharing quiet conversations over breakfast, while birds sang in the garden outside. Kate had regained some of her strength in the peaceful environment, though both of them knew it was temporary. William had arranged for their children to visit every weekend, bringing laughter and energy into the cottage that reminded Kate of why every moment of their life together had been worthwhile. 8-year-old George tried to be brave and grown up, helping his father with small tasks around the cottage and reading to his mother from his favorite adventure books. 5-year-old Charlotte picked flowers for Kate every day, creating elaborate bouquets that filled the cottage with color and the sweet scent of autumn blooms. Little Louis, barely 3 years old, didn't fully understand why they were staying in the cottage instead of going home to the palace, but he seemed content as long as his parents were nearby. He spent hours playing with his toy cars on the cottage floor while Kate watched from her chair, memorizing the sound of his little voice, creating imaginary adventures for his vehicles. During quiet afternoons when the children were napping or playing in the garden, Kate worked on letters she wanted to leave for each of them to read when they were older. She wrote about her hopes for their futures, the values she wanted them to carry forward, and most importantly, how proud she was to be their mother. Each letter was carefully crafted, filled with specific memories and personal advice that she hoped would guide them through the years ahead. William often found her writing at the kitchen table, her delicate handwriting filling page after page with words of love and wisdom. He never interrupted these precious moments, understanding that these letters were perhaps the most important work she would ever do. Sometimes he would simply sit nearby, reading his own book or working on correspondence, comfortable in the shared silence that had always been one of their greatest strengths as a couple. The local doctor, Dr. Phillips, had been visiting twice a week to monitor Kate's condition and adjust her medication as needed. He was a kind man in his 60s who had served the rural community for decades and treated Kate with the same gentle care he showed all his patients. There were no royal protocols in his presence, just a doctor concerned about his patients' comfort and well-being. One particularly beautiful afternoon, Kate felt strong enough for a short walk through the meadow behind the cottage. William walked beside her, matching her slow pace and stopping whenever she needed to rest. They found a spot under their favorite oak tree where they had often picnicked during happier visits, and sat together on a small blanket William had brought along. The countryside stretched out before them, rolling hills dotted with sheep and crossed by stone walls that had stood for centuries. Kate rested her head on William's shoulder and watched clouds drift across the autumn sky, feeling a deep sense of peace despite everything they were facing. This was how she wanted to remember their life together, not the formal ceremonies or public duties, but quiet moments like this when they were simply two people who loved each other completely. "I need to tell you something," Kate said softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle breeze. "I'm not afraid anymore. I was terrified when we first learned about the diagnosis, but being here with you and the children, I feel ready for whatever comes next." William's arm tightened around her, and she could feel his silent tears on her hair. "I want you to promise me something," she continued. "When the time comes, don't try to hold on to me. Let me go with grace, knowing that you and the children will be okay. You're stronger than you know, and they need you to show them how to face difficult things with courage and love." William couldn't speak for several minutes, overwhelmed by her strength and the impossible task she was asking of him. Finally, he managed to whisper, "I promise to try, but I don't know how to imagine life without you." Kate lifted her head to look into his eyes, seeing the depth of his love and his fear reflected there. "You won't be without me," she said with quiet certainty. "Every time you help George with his homework or listen to Charlotte tell you about her day, or read bedtime stories to Louis, I'll be there. Every time you do something kind for someone who needs help. Every time you make our children laugh. Every time you remember that love is stronger than sadness, I'll be right there with you." They sat under the tree until the sun began to set, talking about their children's futures, sharing favorite memories from their years together and simply holding each other close. As the evening air grew cooler, they walked slowly back to the cottage where Mrs. Davies had prepared dinner and lit a fire in the fireplace that filled the rooms with warmth and golden light. As October turned into November, Kate's condition began to change more noticeably. The peaceful weeks at the cottage had given her a final gift of strength and clarity, but now she could feel her body growing tired in ways that rest could no longer remedy. She spent more time in bed, though she insisted on getting dressed each day and sitting by the window where she could watch the garden and the meadow beyond. William had taken extended leave from his royal duties, delegating everything possible to other family members so he could stay by Kate's side. The palace had issued a simple statement explaining that the Duchess was receiving private medical care, but the full truth remained known only to their closest family and friends. Kate had specifically requested this privacy, wanting their final weeks together to be about love and family rather than public attention and media speculation. Her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, had been staying at a nearby bed and breakfast, visiting the cottage every day to spend time with their daughter and help care for the children. Carol often sat beside Kate's bed in the afternoons, holding her hand and sharing quiet conversations about memories from Kate's childhood, her wedding day, and the joy of watching her become a mother. Kate's sister Pippa visited frequently, bringing news from London and updates about mutual friends, but mostly just sitting with Kate and talking about everything and nothing. Their relationship had always been close, but these final weeks had deepened their bond in ways that words could barely express. Pippa helped Kate organize her personal belongings and finish the letters she was writing for the children, serving as both sister and trusted confidant. James, Kate's younger brother, struggled more visibly with the situation, often stepping outside to compose himself before returning to Kate's bedside with forced cheerfulness. Kate understood his difficulty and never pressed him to stay longer than he could handle, instead treasuring the moments when he felt able to simply sit with her and hold her hand. The children continued their weekend visits, but the adults worked carefully to maintain as much normalcy as possible while preparing them gradually for what was coming. George, the eldest, seemed to understand more than he let on, often bringing his mother small gifts, a particularly pretty leaf from the garden, a drawing he had made at school, or a flower he had picked during their walks together. Charlotte had appointed herself as Kate's special helper, bringing glasses of water, fluffing pillows, and reading short stories aloud with the serious concentration of someone who knew she was doing important work. Her bright chatter and constant questions provided welcome distraction during Kate's most difficult days, and her innocence offered comfort that no adult conversation could match. Little Louis simply wanted to be near his mother, often climbing carefully into bed beside her to show her his toys or tell her rambling stories that made perfect sense only to him. Kate treasured these moments, storing up memories of his sweet voice and the way he unconsciously reached for her hand while he played. Dr. Phillips had begun visiting more frequently, monitoring Kate's comfort levels and adjusting her medication to ensure she remained as pain-free as possible. He spoke gently with William about what to expect in the coming days, preparing him for the difficult decisions and moments that lay ahead, while emphasizing that Kate's wishes for dignity and peace would be their primary guide. One evening, as William sat reading beside Kate's bed, she asked him to open the window so she could hear the night sounds of the countryside. The cool November air carried the scent of wood smoke from neighboring chimneys and the distant sound of owls calling to each other across the darkness. Kate listened with her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her face that reminded William of how she had looked on their wedding day. "I want to see the children tomorrow," she said quietly. "All three of them here with us like a regular family evening. Can you arrange that?" William nodded, understanding without being told that this might be one of their last opportunities for such a gathering. He called Carol immediately to ask if the children could stay overnight at the cottage, explaining that Kate was having a particularly good day and wanted extra time with them. Kate spent the next morning gathering her strength for the evening ahead, resting as much as possible while Mrs. Davies and William prepared the cottage for what everyone sensed would be a special and important family dinner. The kitchen filled with the smells of Kate's favorite comfort foods, and William picked the last roses from the garden to place on the dinner table. That afternoon, Kate insisted on getting dressed in her favorite sweater and sitting in the living room to wait for the children's arrival. When she heard their voices in the driveway, her face lit up with a joy that temporarily erased the fatigue and worry of recent weeks. For a few precious hours, the cottage would once again be filled with the laughter and chaos of family life, giving Kate the perfect gift of one last normal evening with the people she loved most in the world. The evening with the children became one of those perfect family moments that seemed to exist outside of time. Kate found energy she didn't know she still possessed, joining in board games at the kitchen table and listening to each child tell her about their week at school. George proudly showed her a project about British history he had been working on, while Charlotte performed an elaborate dance she had learned in her ballet class. Louis, delighted to have both parents' undivided attention, brought every one of his favorite toys to show Kate, explaining in his toddler language how each car could go super fast and how his stuffed elephant was very brave. Kate listened to each presentation with the same attention she had once given to state ministers, asking questions and praising his imagination with genuine enthusiasm. After dinner, they all gathered in the living room, where William had built a fire that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Kate sat in her favorite chair with Louis curled up in her lap, while George and Charlotte sprawled on the rug with their coloring books. William read aloud from a collection of fairy tales, using different voices for each character in a way that made all three children giggle and beg for one more story. As the evening grew later, Kate helped tuck each child into the cottage's spare bedrooms, spending extra time with each one. She told George how proud she was of his kindness and responsibility, encouraging him to always take care of his younger siblings. She reminded Charlotte to keep being brave and curious about the world, and to never let anyone tell her she couldn't achieve her dreams simply because she was a girl. With Louis, she simply held him close while he fell asleep, singing the same lullaby she had sung to him since he was a baby. His peaceful breathing and the weight of his small body against her chest filled her with a contentment that made all the pain of recent months seem worthwhile. These children were her greatest accomplishment, her most important legacy, and the proof that her life had mattered in ways that went far beyond royal duties or public service. When all three children were finally asleep, Kate and William sat together by the dying fire, holding hands and sharing the comfortable silence that had always been one of their greatest strengths as a couple. They didn't need to discuss what both of them knew, that Kate's condition was deteriorating more rapidly now, and that their time together was becoming very precious indeed. "Thank you for tonight," Kate whispered, her head resting on William's shoulder. "I needed to see them like that, just being children, happy and safe and loved. Whatever happens next, I'll carry that picture with me." William kissed the top of her head, memorizing the scent of her hair and the feeling of her hand in his. The next few days passed quietly, with Kate spending more time resting but still insisting on small routines that brought her comfort. She asked William to read to her from their favorite books, poems they had shared during their courtship and novels they had discovered together during lazy weekend mornings in their early marriage. His voice reading familiar passages provided comfort that no medication could match. Dr. Phillips visited more frequently now, monitoring Kate's vital signs and consulting quietly with William about practical arrangements that needed to be made. The doctor's gentle professionalism helped both of them navigate these difficult conversations while maintaining focus on Kate's comfort and dignity above all else. Kate continued, working on final letters for close friends and family members, wanting to leave each person with specific memories and messages of gratitude. She wrote to her protection officers, thanking them for years of quiet service and for becoming like family to her and the children. She penned notes to staff members at the palace who had made her feel welcome during her sometimes overwhelming transition to royal life. Most importantly, she finished the detailed letters for each of her children, to be given to them at different stages of their lives. For George, she wrote about leadership and responsibility, encouraging him to use whatever platform he might have to help others and make the world better. For Charlotte, she wrote about strength and independence, urging her to never dim her light for anyone, and to always speak up for what she believed was right. For Louis, still so young, she wrote about love and kindness, hoping that when he was old enough to read her words, he would understand how much joy he had brought to her life simply by being himself. Each letter was sealed with wax and labeled with instructions about when it should be opened, giving her children gifts of love that would last long beyond her physical presence. William found her finishing the last letter one afternoon, tears streaming down her face as she carefully folded the pages. He knelt beside her chair and gathered her into his arms, both of them crying together for all the milestones she would miss, all the conversations they would never have, and all the love that would have to sustain their family through the years ahead. The morning came when Kate could no longer pretend that she had unlimited time remaining. She woke feeling different, more fragile somehow, as if her connection to the world around her was becoming increasingly delicate. Dr. Phillips confirmed what both she and William already knew. Her body was beginning the final process of letting go, and they likely had days rather than weeks left together. Kate asked William to call her parents and siblings, wanting to say goodbye to each of them, while she still had the strength for meaningful conversations. Carol arrived first, bringing with her the special strength that mothers seem to possess in impossible moments. She sat beside Kate's bed and helped her daughter prepare for what was coming, with the same gentle guidance she had provided throughout Kate's life. "I'm so proud of the woman you became," Carol whispered, stroking Kate's hair as she had when Kate was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. "You brought so much love and grace into the world, and you loved those children with everything you had. That's all any mother can hope for." Kate squeezed her mother's hand, finding comfort in this connection to the woman who had given her life and taught her how to navigate the world with kindness. Michael Middleton struggled more with the goodbye, his emotions overwhelming his usual composed demeanor. Kate held his hand and reminded him of their special walks through the countryside when she was young, how he had taught her to appreciate nature and find peace in quiet moments. "Every time you watch a sunset or hear birds singing, remember that we shared those things," she told him. "Love doesn't end just because life does." Pippa and James came together, both fighting tears as they crowded around Kate's bed like children seeking comfort from an older sister. Kate spoke to each of them about their futures, encouraging Pippa to continue her charity work and reminding James to always remember how much laughter he had brought to their family gatherings. She asked them both to stay close to William and the children in the years ahead, to be the aunts and uncle who would help keep her memory alive through shared stories and continued love. When the children arrived for what everyone knew would be their final visit, Kate summoned reserves of strength she didn't know she still possessed. She spent individual time with each child, creating last memories that she hoped would sustain them through the difficult times ahead. With George, she talked about his upcoming school projects and reminded him how proud she was of his kindness to other children. Charlotte climbed carefully into bed beside her mother, chattering about her friends and her ballet lessons with the innocent trust of a child who believed that love could conquer anything. Kate listened to every word, storing up the sound of her daughter's voice and the feeling of her small hand playing with Kate's hair. She told Charlotte stories about her own childhood, creating connections between past and future that would help her daughter understand her heritage. Louis, too young to fully comprehend the gravity of the situation, simply wanted to show his mother his latest drawings and tell her about the birds he had seen in the garden. Kate held him close, breathing in his sweet scent and memorizing the weight of his small body against hers. She sang him their special lullaby one last time, her voice soft but steady as she watched his eyes grow heavy with sleep. That evening, after the children had been taken to stay with their grandparents, Kate and William found themselves alone together for what they both knew would be their final night as husband and wife. They talked quietly about their early days together at university, their wedding day, the birth of each child, and the thousands of small moments that had woven their lives together into something beautiful and lasting. "I need you to know something," Kate said, as the room grew dark around them. "Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Every challenge we faced, every joy we shared, every ordinary Tuesday morning we spent together, it was all worth it. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." William held her close, his tears flowing freely now as the weight of their final farewell settled over them. They spent their last hours together in comfortable silence, holding hands and listening to each other breathe, memorizing the feeling of being close to the person who had made their life complete. Kate drifted in and out of peaceful sleep, always waking to find William beside her, his steady presence providing the security and love that had anchored her throughout their marriage. As dawn approached, Kate felt a strange sense of anticipation mixed with peace. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that she had loved completely and been loved in return. The cottage around them was filled with memories of laughter and love, and she could imagine William and the children returning here in future years to remember the happiness they had shared. "Promise me you'll bring them back here sometimes," she whispered to William as the first light of morning began to filter through the bedroom window. "Let them remember this place as somewhere we were happy together. Not just where we said goodbye," William promised, understanding that she was giving him a gift, a way to transform their final location into a place of comfort, rather than sorrow for their children's future visits. The morning light filled the cottage bedroom with a golden glow that seemed almost ethereal, as if nature itself was honoring the sacred moment that was approaching. Kate had been awake since dawn, watching the sun rise through their bedroom window one last time, feeling a deep sense of completion and peace that surprised her with its intensity. She was no longer afraid, no longer fighting against what was happening to her body. Instead, she felt surrounded by love and ready for whatever journey lay ahead. William sat beside her bed, holding her hand and matching his breathing to hers, as if he could somehow keep her anchored to this world through the sheer force of his love. They had said everything that needed to be said during the long night hours, sharing their deepest feelings and most precious memories. Now, in the quiet morning light, Words seemed less important than simply being present with each other. Dr. Phillips arrived quietly, checking Kate's vital signs with the gentle efficiency of someone who understood the sanctity of these final moments. He confirmed what William already knew from watching Kate's peaceful expression and increasingly shallow breathing. They were approaching the end of their journey together. The doctor withdrew to give them privacy, remaining available but allowing the morning to unfold according to Kate's wishes for dignity and peace. Kate's parents, Pippa and James, had returned to the cottage earlier that morning, gathering in the living room to provide support for William, while respecting Kate's desire for these final hours to be primarily about her marriage and her immediate family. Their quiet presence in the house provided comfort without intrusion, letting Kate know that she was surrounded by love even as she prepared to let go. As the morning progressed, Kate found herself drifting between consciousness and peaceful rest, always returning to awareness when she felt William's hand squeeze hers or heard his voice speaking softly to her. He told her stories about their children, shared memories from their happiest times together, and repeatedly reassured her that he would keep the promises he had made about caring for their family and honoring her memory. Around midday, Kate stirred and opened her eyes with more clarity than she had shown in several days. She looked directly at William, her gaze steady and filled with such love that he felt his breath catch in his throat. "It's time," she said simply, her voice barely above a whisper but completely certain. "I can feel it coming and I'm not afraid. I need you to know that this isn't goodbye. It's just a different kind of love." William helped her sit up slightly, adjusting her pillows so she could look out the window at the garden she had loved so much. The autumn flowers were still blooming despite the November chill, their colors bright against the peaceful countryside backdrop. Kate watched a pair of birds flying together across the meadow, and a small smile crossed her face as if she was seeing something beautiful that William couldn't quite perceive. "Tell the children," she said, her words coming slowly but with perfect clarity, "that every time they see something beautiful, a sunset, a flower, a bird singing, they should remember that love is everywhere, even when we can't see the person we love anymore. Tell them their mother will always be proud of them, no matter what choices they make or what challenges they face." She turned her attention back to William, reaching up with tremendous effort to touch his face one last time. "You have been the love of my life," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a fairy tale that was even better than the stories we read to the children. Thank you for making me a mother, a wife, and a better person than I ever thought I could be." William leaned down to kiss her forehead, tasting the salt of his own tears as they fell onto her skin. "Thank you for choosing me," he said, his voice broken but filled with gratitude. "Thank you for loving our children the way you did, for showing me what it means to put family first, and for making every day of our marriage feel like a gift." Kate closed her eyes and settled back against her pillows, her breathing becoming more peaceful and rhythmic. William continued holding her hand, telling her how much he loved her and describing the bright future he envisioned for their children, filled with the values and strength she had given them. He talked about the garden they had planted together, how he would tend it in her memory and teach the children to find peace in growing things. As the afternoon sun streamed through the cottage windows, Kate's breathing gradually became softer and more distant. Like gentle waves receding from a peaceful shore, William felt the exact moment when her spirit let go, a sensation of profound stillness that seemed to fill the entire room with grace. She looked completely peaceful, as if she had simply fallen asleep while listening to someone she loved telling her a beautiful story. The silence that followed felt sacred rather than empty, filled with the presence of a love so deep it seemed to transform the very air around them. William sat with Kate for a long time, holding her hand and feeling grateful beyond words for every moment they had shared together. Outside the window, the autumn garden continued to bloom in defiant beauty, and somewhere in the distance, birds were singing the same songs that had provided the soundtrack to their final morning together. When William finally stood to call Dr. Phillips and begin the gentle process of saying goodbye, he carried with him the absolute certainty that love this deep doesn't end with death. It simply changes form, becoming something that touches every beautiful moment that follows and lives on in every act of kindness, every burst of laughter, and every time their children choose to love others with the same generous hearts their mother had given them.